Just when you thought it was safe to buy a low-budget shark movie, we come to Bull Shark. This one is directed and written by Brett Bentman and stars Thom Hallum as Spencer. Now, in the realm of the shark movie, of which there are, let's be honest, quite a few, it is the Great White that gets the lion's share of attention, but there have been other movies that have featured other species of shark, and this includes the bull shark. For example, we had the, I think it was 2003, Lou Diamond Phillips movie Red Water, which also featured a bull shark. Now, the unique thing about a bull shark, in case you do not know, is that bull sharks can actually survive in fresh water as well as salt water, and this makes them kind of unique in sharks, at least those of which are dangerous to kind of humans. An actual fact, and I could be wrong here, but I believe the real life incident that was the inspiration for the novel Jaws, which was you know, turn of the kind of the 20th century, I believe, was actually a bull shark getting into a kind of a river system. So here we have 2022's Bull Shark, a low budget movie which is essentially follows the kind of the same basic kind of story as Jaws. We have this shark somehow getting into this lake area within Texas, and it is up to the local game warden, Spencer, to try and kind of put a stop to it. He gets kind of, you know, runs into trouble with the mayor, who of course wants to keep a lid on it and is worried about getting re-elected and is trying to kind of cover up what is kind of going on because he doesn't want kind of the bad press. Obviously as well, Spencer is also fighting personal demons with a battle of alcoholism. Now what will happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's first of all talk about what I think works in Bull Shark. I think this movie probably is in danger of falling in with the mass of low budget shark movies that exist, and to be honest with you, a lot of these kind of tend to fall in the same problem, and that is bad CGI sharks. And I won't lie, this one does have that as well. We'll come on to that again. But I do think this movie does have something what a lot of these low budget straight to kind of VOD, straight to DVD movies don't have, and that is it takes itself somewhat seriously. So this is not a silly, spoofy shark movie. This one, I suppose, like Red Water and you know, other kind of contemporaries like that, is not a spoof, and it takes this movie somewhat kind of seriously, and that is my preference personally on kind of shark movies. I'm not a huge fan of the kind of the silly kind of robo sharks and giant sharktopus and things like this. So I quite like a more grounded tale, because obviously that's something that could potentially kind of happen. And it does follow the same basic plot premise of Jaws. There's no kind of getting around it. But I still quite like this kind of more of a measured take on it. And one thing that sometimes these low budget movies tend to be guilty of is padding out the running time with kind of like annoying B plots where there's gangsters that are involved, and you know, it just is an excuse ultimately to kind of have cheaper kind of shots dealing with just humans running around or talking in rooms and stuff like that. And it's just, like I say, a reason to not have kind of like all the kind of money spent on special effects. This movie doesn't do that. The movie is purely kind of focused on the actual kind of shark plot, albeit there's kind of a few diversions with personal circumstances and stuff. But we don't have an over-the-top silly kind of B plot involving that kind of thing. Even the kind of the mayor, who is purported to be like an antagonist to a degree, you know, threatening the people that are maybe helping Spencer, the kind of the game warden, and trying covering things up. It's just kind of, it's not over the top, you know. It's just done within a conversation and kind of cutting funding and things like that, rather than, you know, I'm going to kill you if you don't do this kind of thing. So I appreciated some restraint in this movie, because it doesn't go into schlocky, spoofy territory at any point, despite the fact that I think you probably would expect that from this kind of movie. So I appreciated this movie had some restraint. And the movies, even though the movie's plot is essentially a carbon copy of Jaws, down to the kind of, you know, the kids kind of going in the water towards the end and things like that, You know, I still appreciated an interesting, you know, progression in regards to the kind of the story development and the kind of the narrative here. Spencer's kind of journey from essentially dropout sheriff to kind of being the kind of the hero that, you know, he wants to be to his son and things like that. So yeah, the movie certainly isn't original by any stretch of the imagination and in regards to a narrative, but I still think it was done, you know, low budget version, but still done to a kind of a reasonable standard. And that leads me to, I think, some of the acting here, which again I thought was, at least with the kind of the main characters here, done pretty well. And I actually kind of quite like some of the personal interplay between the characters. For example, there's a line of dialogue which says like you know, the mayor says, "Oh, the sheriff won't be a problem." You know, he's kind of, you know, he'll be kind of easily bored. Just, oh god, we're gonna have some type of over the top, unbelievable kind of character moment with the sheriff, but it wasn't really. You think it's going to go to over the top. I just think it pulls it back, and some of the kind of the little character moments that are introduced, like the coroner, for example, is constantly eating kind of like snacks while she's kind of telling people again, and it just makes her kind of look quite schlubby, which is quite kind of funny. So there's some kind of neat little kind of character moments here and there. You know, some of these the bit part players aren't particularly good, but I actually thought the cast of the kind of, at least the main characters here did a pretty good job, and the pacing of the movie isn't too bad. You know, it's relatively kind of well shot, I think, on a technical level in regards to cinematography, sound design, all that kind of stuff. It's done to a you know, a reasonable, acceptable level for this movie. And I think if you're kind of buying a straight to, or you're renting a straight to the DVD or VOD movie, I think you can. This is kind of what you'd be expecting. I think I'm not being too disappointed with kind of this level of kind of production. What doesn't work, unfortunately, I feel a lot of the issues that could be levied at this film are probably down to budgetary reasons more than anything else. I kind of already touched upon it, but the actual sharks themselves are very disappointing. They really do. They are really kind of quite terrible, bad CGI sharks, especially when we kind of see them up close. There are a couple of reasonable shots where we kind of see like an overhead view, or we kind of see it, just kind of the tail kind of going into you know, bloody water and things like that. There's a couple of shots where I think it looks okay, but certainly where the shark is kind of facing the camera, for example, with its mouth open, it kind of looks kind of quite poor in those kind of sort of sequences, and you know, to the point where it's noticeably bad. And there are even low budget shark movies what I think do a better job with the kind of the CGI. So the CGI is kind of below par, even I would say, for this kind of level of film. I think the movie's a little bit too close to the movie Jaws, down to even how they defeat the shark at the end. I think is a kind of a variation of the kind of the you know, the close of the Jaws film. I think, you know, did we need to do more or less exactly the kind of the same thing? I think there could have been more of an effort here to try and, you know, you could still emulate the basic structure of a Jaws movie, but change, I think, a little more here. There are certain things that I feel were left unresolved. The mayor's kind of like trying to kind of cover up the whole kind of shark situation, trying to intimidate the oceanographic scientists, the kind of the coroner and things like that. You never really feel it paid off, because we just kind of get, after that, kind of we more or less kind of just get on and deal with the shark, and the kind of the mayor isn't really a factor in it so much, all that, to be honest with you. So I feel those things were introduced and, you know, are never really kind of paid off. And we have a character like the mayor in some of these films, and Jaws didn't do this, to be honest with you, but normally you'd expect peak characters like that to kind of get their comeuppance and stuff, but, you know, it doesn't in this one. I think that plot line is just dropped. Although, admittedly, I think you can't always expect every kind of antagonistic character to always kind of get their just desserts, kind of, so to speak. And the other thing I think that may kind of annoy shark movie fans is the actual kills here, as well as the actual CGI sharks being disappointing. The actual shark attacks themselves are largely kind of like just splashing about in water, no real kind of gore. I mean, we see a practical fin and stuff, but there's not really much kind of done with the actual kind of shark attacks. And again, I suspect this is more obviously, well, it probably most probably is a budgetary issue more than anything else. But it is a little disappointing, and it kind of feels, excuse the pun, somewhat kind of toothless. Other than that, as I've said, it kind of is just a little bit too similar to Jaws, and some of the kind of the smaller kind of the roles here, the bit parts. There's a guy, one of the victims, again, just overacting and things like that. There's a few instances here where there's some of the kind of the smaller characters are clearly somewhat inexperienced, I would say. Again, but most of the cast I think are actually okay. I personally didn't think this was a bad film, I have to say. Do I think it's good? I think it is the best I can say about this movie. I don't think it will necessarily, people would hate it. I actually think it's just kind of like an average kind of, an average kind of shark movie for this kind of level of budget. I think, if you were to kind of get this knowing that you were watching a lower budget shark movie, I don't think you'd be too disappointed with it. I mean, we've seen a couple of shark movies already in the last kind of 6 months, and I feel, weren't as strong as this, to be honest with you. This one, I've got to say, I do think, again, and I feel this movie is particularly kind of low budget, but I have to say I still found it engaging. I found the characters engaging, things like this. I'll give it a 5, a bang on average mark for me. I feel the budget is, the main issue here, but for the obviously low budget that they had, I think on a technical level, that was the kind of like probably the best that they could muster up. But I do wish they kind of could have done more with it, and I do wish it wasn't quite as similar as the exact plot from Jaws. Anyway, and I have one last thing. I'm sure that in this movie, no one realises that bull sharks can swim in natural fresh water until we actually going to get to the shark expert. I'm sure some people would know that. Anyways, 5 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.